Wayne Public Library's virtual author chat. My guest today is best-selling author Jessica Lauryn. Jessica has been writing since before she could hold a pen. Her contemporary romance suspense novels have been described as having just the right amount of passion and romance. A native of New Jersey, Jessica enjoys collecting antiques and finding beautiful wooded areas to explore with her family when she's not writing. Welcome, Jessica. Please tell us a little more about yourself and your new novel.
Thank you, Janet. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first author event since becoming a new mommy. I had a baby girl 4 months ago. Her name is Lila, and some of you might recognize she was named after the heroine of my first story, Dangerous Ally. I'm very passionate about my writing. I have been writing for about 16 years officially. Unofficially throughout my whole life. When I was a kid, I used to play with dolls and make up stories about the world that they lived in. And to me, that was playing. And as I got older, I realized that I was a writer at heart, and it was something that I had to try for myself. And when I graduated from college, I decided to write a romance novel. I had never actually read a romance novel, and I got myself some books on the craft of writing and practiced, and eventually I found Romance Writers of America kind of on a whim, because I was looking for something to put as a credential in my first query letter when I was trying to sell my first novel. And what I realized was it was actually a wonderful organization, which was full of networking, mentorship, advice. And I've been a member of Romance Writers of America ever since. And eventually I found New Jersey Romance Writers, which is our local chapter. And I've met some of my best friends there, some of whom are on the call tonight. And it became a wonderful place for me to learn more about writing and to connect with people who are as passionate about doing what I love as I am. And here I am today, 10, 11 years a published author, and I have so many stories in me that I want to tell, and I'm just excited to keep writing stories and keep telling stories. It's what I was born to do, and it's what I love more than anything.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing us so much about your passion for the genre and your passion for writing, just writing in general. Your latest book. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the premise?
Sure. So my latest book is An Intoxicating Interlude. And An Intoxicating Interlude is book 4 in my Rayburn Theater series. All of my titles in my series are standalone novels. I like to put a little bit of a cliffhanger, but I like to have a satisfactory happily ever after with the characters at the end of each story in my series. So in this story, Ryder Nathanson, who is the younger of the 2 brothers in my series, he has recently gotten out of prison, and he wants to get revenge on the woman that he feels sent him there, which was his former crush, Danny Talbert. And Danny she's an actress at Rayburn Theater and also an exotic dancer at the dancing club, which is also connected to my series. And Danny, she had a hard life. She had a baby and has been raising her son on her own. He's now 4 years old. And she would like nothing more than to get out of town and start a new life. But what is calling her back to her hometown of Briarcliff Manor is her love of Rayburn Theater. She dreams of being a star actress. And Ryder sort of tangles her dream in front of her like a carrot. And Danny, as much as she hates Ryder and she wants to start a new life, she's drawn back by her passion. And so they have sort of a complicated connection. to each other. The sort of a love-hate relationship, and eventually they fall for each other very hard, and that's a little bit about Intoxicating Interlude.
That it's part of a series.
Yes.
How many books are in the series?
It will be 5 when it's complete. I'm currently working on the final book in the series, An Enchanting Song, and I'm working on it a little bit slowly because I have a new baby, but I look forward to finishing that hopefully this year.
Are all of your novels, have they all been part of a series, or have you also written standalone novels?
When I first started out, I thought that I was going to write all standalone novels. And what I realized as I was writing my first story, which at the time was A Dangerous Proposal, not the first book that I published, but the first book that I wrote, is that I love series because I love connecting characters and their worlds. And I create interesting side characters who end up falling for each other, forming new couples. And I just love building worlds, connecting the stories and continuing on and seeing what happens next. So in the 2 series that I've published, they each, the Pinnacles of Power series and the Rayburn Theater series, they each will have 5 stories when complete. And I have a lot of other ideas for future books. Some 5-book series, some 3-book series, but I really, really like series, connecting characters and continuing the story after the story ends.
I tend to agree. I'm a very big fan of series also. So I prefer that. And also for exactly the same reason you said, the interconnected characters, it's always fun to envision the story for that next character.
Yes.
As you're writing. You described your stories as contemporary romantic suspense. Why romantic suspense and not just like suspense or thrillers? Why did you add the romance, especially since you just mentioned that you hadn't read romance, but then you studied and you learned the craft and you decided it was romance that you were going to pursue?
So the simple answer is I love romance. I use the danger to fuel the romance. It's so fun to get 2 characters who have feelings for each other, but maybe won't admit it, into a life or death situation and see how they will react. I'm not a huge fan of really dark suspense, scary with a lot of violence. I've read books by some wonderful authors that have put some absolutely terrifying images in my head that it takes weeks to shake off. I don't like to leave my readers feeling that scared. I just want to have enough suspense to fuel the romance. For me, that's where my passion lies. And it did take me a little while to figure that out in life, but I am a romantic all the way.
Since it is suspense, there's always got to be a hero and a villain. Which do you prefer writing, the heroes or the villains?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I have taken a lot of my villains from previous stories and turned them into the hero in a different novel in the series. And so I guess I would say I enjoy writing the villains more, essentially, because they are such complicated characters. And what was happening to me when I was first starting to write, and even before, was I would read other authors' work and I found myself falling for the villain time and time again, sometimes not very nice guys. And I thought there must be something seriously wrong with me. But then I realized this is actually something that I can really take and make my own. And I took a lot of these villains from previous stories and began to work to reform them because I wanted to see them step into the role of hero, mainly because I wanted to have a romantic relationship with them myself. And I thought if I feel this way, then there must be other readers who do too. So I love to take these very complicated villains and really break them down, kind of the way we do with every hero, but perhaps one who has, even deeper, darker demons to overcome, and really break them down and bring them to that point of vulnerability where they see the error of their ways and they can actually love and be loved in return. It's really an amazing thing.
Is there any one character in particular that you've written that you would call your favorite?
That is a very difficult question to answer. They're really all my favorite, but I would say the character that I'm working with right now, Sebastian Nathanson, who he is, I guess, the darkest character in the Rayburn Theater series, with the exception of the main villain, Augustus, who does not reform in the series. Augustus is Sebastian's father. Sebastian has led a very complicated life under the thumb of an abusive man, being groomed to help him reclaim the theater that he believes to be his, and trying to find his place in the world, being very passionate about theater, but being a very obsessive sort of person. And I'm figuring out a lot about him as I write this final book in the series. When I first started with him in the first book, he was more of a cookie cutter villain that we didn't really see was capable of reform. And now I'm putting him into situations where he realizes that he is capable of remorse and not just the obsessive personality that he sees himself as earlier in the series. The series spans over about a decade of time. So we're seeing him over a pretty lengthy period of time, and we've seen him do some pretty terrible things, which, you know, some might say, wow, I don't think you could reform this character. And I like to take that exact kind of character as a challenge, and I want to bring them to that point of reform. It shows us that we're all capable of that kind of reform as human beings, which is an amazing thing.
The final book, the villain that you're describing, can you tell us a little bit about what the storyline's going to be?
Sure. So in this final story, Sebastian attends a ball at Rayburn Theater. He is in disguise. It's a costume ball, and he is hoping to best Evan Masters, who Evan is in charge of Rayburn Theater. He's married to Rayburn Theater's chairwoman of the board. The two of them are co-owners of the theater, and he is hoping to get information about the next play that Evan is going to be putting on, so that he can put on the same play first. Sebastian has at this point opened his own theater solely in hopes of destroying Rayburn Theater. And while at the ball, he meets this beautiful woman who is wearing a mask, and he knows everybody at Rayburn Theater, so he's surprised he doesn't know who she is. And incidentally, he follows her from the ballroom and finds her in Evan Masters' office. So he's wondering what she's doing there, and she seems to be beating him to the punch in trying to do something suspicious regarding Rayburn Theater. And throughout the story, he's trying to figure out what her agenda is, and she's trying to figure out what his agenda is. And it's a very interesting, complicated story. So I'll leave you with that.
Is there anything that inspires you? I mean, they take place in theaters, so music or anything that inspires you that adds like another layer so that you can get into the characters, into the storyline?
So this story, this series in particular, I was very inspired by Phantom of the Opera. I saw Phantom of the Opera for the first time when I was 21 years old, and I fell head over heels in love with the music and the story. And I've listened to the soundtrack a million times as I'm writing this series. I love to listen to music as I'm writing, especially classical music. I find it incredibly inspiring. I listen to the soundtrack from Titanic a lot, because that is my favorite movie of all time. Absolutely beautiful love story, really beautiful music. No matter what I'm writing, it just sort of brings me back to that central place of romance and tragedy and drama, and just gets my juices flowing.
does inspire. Um, so that's wonderful. I have to say, I love like Broadway musicals, and the music is definitely an inspiration for writing and for all different things. So that's great. What is the most difficult part of writing for you?
Showing versus telling. And that was the first bit of advice that I got when I was first starting out as an author. That was what took me from unpublished author to published author with a book that was ready to sell. Basically, you don't want to tell the story in a lot of narrative and description. You want to show it with action, dialogue, paint a picture of what's happening in the moment. And I am an author who likes to outline my stories, and I can work very quickly that way. And it does help me work through my writer's block. But then when I'm going back and revising, I have to do that showing part and really slow myself down and say what's happening in the moment, what's around the characters, what's on the wall, what can they see, how are they feeling, how does the temperature in the room feel, all these little details that we might neglect on the first shot out. I have to slow down and kind of go through everything. And I find that kind of boring and tedious. And that's why it takes me longer than say a month to write a book. I can get the story down very fast. That's my favorite thing to do. But it's going back and doing the grunt work, shall we say, that I find the most difficult.
It's or just the fill-in for the different, as you said, all the touching on all the senses to complete the picture.
Yeah.
Is editing, because I mean, a lot of authors will say it's the editing process. So it's kind of the editing, it sounds like.
Yes, that for me, that is editing. What I do is I keep a separate sheet of notes on my computer, and I go through the book and I keep writing everything down because I can that's the way my brain works. I sort of work off the notes and tell myself what to change. And then I take the notes, go back to the manuscript and actually make the changes. So yes, that's how I do my editing, regardless of whether it's the first edit or the last edit.
I get, like, it sounds like it's more of like a combination of plotter and pantser. I mean, because
Yes.
you get it all down really quickly, which is kind of getting the story out there, but a little bit more plotting when you're filling it.
So that's the plotting part for me, is my notes and my outline, and then the pantser part sort of comes in later. Some of it just has to be panstering, and a lot of times I'll realize maybe there's a scene that it didn't occur to me to put in there. Usually, ironically, I like to reform villains. That's really my thing. But a lot of times I'll miss where the villain sort of reforms, and I'll miss that key scene, and I have to go back and add it in later. And I'll figure that out. That's sort of the pantser in me, figuring it out, trudging my way through when I'm in the middle of the story. I don't usually catch that as I'm just doing my plotting part. So yes, I'm definitely doing a mix of both. I think we all are. I go more on the plotter end, but I get to pantser at some point in the process.
What was your publishing journey like? Big publisher, small press, indie published? Can you tell us a little about?
Sure. So my first my first desire was to be with a traditional publisher. And when I first joined New Jersey Romance Writers, I went to conferences in hopes of finding a big publisher. And I had one of the big five interested in my first story, Dangerous Ally. And she wanted me to make some changes, which while the criticism was constructive, it was also it would have changed the course of the series. Ultimately, the editor did not have the same vision for the series that I did. And so what I realized was I can improve upon this story, but I don't want to take it in the direction that she was looking for her line. And that was when I began to see that I'm a little more independent than some authors. I ended up selling that story to a small publisher who wanted to keep it the way that it was. That was Siren Bookstrand. And so they became my first publisher. And I published my first 7 stories with Siren Bookstrand. And as I went through my publishing journey, I realized that there were a lot of parts of the process that I wanted to take control over, the covers and the formatting, and to be able to run different sales on my books. And so I published my 8th book, A Sultry Performance, on my own. And I realized that some of these things that I thought might be so difficult to do that the publisher was doing were actually quite doable, and that I really enjoy being a part of every aspect of the process. And I actually asked for my rights back to my first 7 titles, became completely indie published, published my 9th book, An Intoxicating Interlude, on my own. And not looking back, I think this is probably where I always wanted to be, but I had to try the other side to see what I was missing, because I would have always wondered, if I had not gone with some sort of a publisher, if there was something better. And now I know that I like having control of my own destiny. I've talked with other authors who were asked to completely change premises for books that they wanted simply because the publisher was looking for something else at the time. I've talked with authors who've had books under their mattress for 20 years that they've never published, and that's just so sad to me. If we've got a great idea, then it deserves to be developed and written and shared with the world. And I really like being able to have the flexibility to do things in my own pace. As a new mother, I'm writing very slowly these days, and I don't have a deadline, and I wouldn't be able to handle one. But I know that when my daughter grows up, I'll still be doing this, and I'm still in the game. And that's great. I can run things at my own pace and just do what I was born to do. So I really like indie publishing. I know I've found my place in the writing world.
Getting your rights back, how hard is that, or is that just a request? How could you explain what
I think it depends on the publisher. For me, it was relatively simple. I was told up front that I wouldn't get some of them back until a certain amount of time had passed. So at first, I only got the paperback book rights back to the titles, and then I had to push a little more to get the digital rights back. And then after asking a couple of times, I was able to get my later titles, my Rayburn Theater titles back. I think at that point, maybe they just wanted to get me to stop asking, but I did get everything I wanted eventually. It took a little bit of work.
And now you had mentioned that you have more control over your title and your cover. Um, how much input now? Like, what's the process for you to choose covers, and how do you go about that?
So I use a stock image, and I choose the image over, I go through a database, and I pick the image that I think looks the most like what I'm trying to portray. My former publisher, they liked having both a hero and heroine on the cover. I really like that too. I've seen a lot of romance novels where no one is pictured on the cover, and there might be a pretty cover, but to me, I'm not always sure that it's a romance. And maybe those books sell better, hard for me to say, but I personally like having the hero and heroine on the cover. It tells me what the book is about. And I like having my covers all look like each other, because I want people to be able to pick up the book and say, this is a Jessica Lauryn book. So I've chosen a lot of images that kind of look like each other, look like the characters that I'm trying to portray, look like the scene in the book that I'm trying to portray. And sometimes I'll even pick the cover out ahead of time before I write the book, so I know to say, okay, the heroine is wearing a black dress in this scene. And then it looks like I did it on purpose. So I really love that. So I work with this database. I pick the image, and then I work with a cover designer who creates what I ask her to do in terms of the lettering. And on some of my books, I have quotes from reviews that I've gotten, and on others, I have lines from the story, teaser blurb, a little short, 1 to 2 sentence blurb from the story. And that's pretty much it.
I love that you sometimes pick the image and then write the scene, write some scenes based on like the art. That's great. That's great. That's like, because when we look at covers, sometimes we're like, this does not look at all like what is described, what the characters described, and that kind of makes you feel a little weird, like why did they choose that? So it's great that you kind of try and incorporate it into the actual story.
That was definitely the case with some of my earlier covers when I was with Bookstrand, and I was glad to be able to correct that the second time around.
What about writers groups? You touched on RWA and JRW. How do you feel about writers groups? And I think I know the answer. And about having critique partners. Have they been a godsend, basically something that helped you out tremendously? Sounds like. What can you say? I mean, we're always hopeful that there's somebody who watches this who's looking to maybe write that story that's in their heart. So what can you offer them?
Groups can be very, very helpful, especially when you're first starting out. I knew so little about the craft when I first began, and I just learned so much when I joined New Jersey Romance Writers, how to write a query letter, how to write a synopsis, how to show versus tell. I attended countless workshops over the last decade. And even when you've mastered some of these things, it's great to keep them fresh in your mind because there's just so much to this. There's so many aspects to writing. And there's new information every day. Things are changing constantly, especially on the business end with marketing. We're often getting together saying, what's the secret to marketing? And there really is no secret, and it doesn't work the same way for any two authors. It doesn't even necessarily work the same way for the same author. There's no guarantees that if you're selling really well one year that that'll still be happening the next year. So we need to keep learning and keep seeing what's going on out there in the publishing world, and writers groups are a great way to do that.
Anything else you'd like to give a piece of advice to a new writer that's starting out?
The most important thing that you can do as a writer is to be true to yourself. Are you writing this because this is what you think is selling right now, or are you writing this because this is the book of your dreams? And I am so big on writing what I want to write. That's why I do this. And I'm fortunate to have found readers who love what I love as much as I do, but that's where the passion comes from in writing what I want to write. Otherwise, why are we doing this? This is a labor of love. This is this takes a lot of work to be a writer, and do it because you love it, and just always be true to yourself. And that's true in life, and certainly in writing as well.
Thank you. I hope that helps someone out there. I always do a little research, and you had a lot of information on your website, so thank you for that. And I always toss in a fun question at the end. I also am going to ask anybody if they have any questions for Jessica, if they would write it in the chat, and then I will ask her. But I want to ask you, on the website, you mentioned that as a child you used to watch soap operas with your mom. So what soaps did you watch, and did you have a favorite couple or storyline?
To clarify, my mom and I still watch the soaps together, and she's on the call tonight. We watch Days of Our Lives and The Young and the Restless, and we've been watching Days of Our Lives together since I was 6 years old. So really long time. That was watching Days of Our Lives was when I first realized that I loved romantic suspense. They were doing a storyline in the late 80s called The Cruise of Deception. And I could see at that time the way that the danger that the characters were in was igniting all of these different romances. And I remember as a little girl running back and forth with my blow up tube around my arms, pretending that it was a life jacket because the characters had just been thrown overboard and they end up deserted on an island. And I just found this to be so exciting and romantic, and I definitely held that inside of myself, and it became a part of who I was, and certainly a part of my writing. My favorite couple on the show was Jack and Jennifer, and Jack and Jennifer get together for the first time on that cruise after a very long-winded battle, and Jack is one of those characters who actually is a former villain. So that was probably something that inspired the idea of reforming former villains in me. And to this day, I watch a few soap operas just to sort of keep different actors' voices fresh in my mind. And I will always sort of cast characters in my own books with real life actors because it gives them a voice and a face of somebody that I can really visualize very well. So I find that very helpful and a lot of fun to do.
I have a couple of questions, but I have to first tell you, I watched Days of Our Lives. I watched many soap operas over the years, but I watched Days of Our Lives, Jack and Jennifer, my favorite too. Is there a real theater that you've used as a setting for your Rayburn series?
No, there is not. I came purely out of my imagination, born out of a love of Phantom of the Opera and the fantasy of taking something very historic, set in a different time, and sort of bringing it into the modern world. Came purely out of my imagination. I envisioned it to be in Briarcliff Manor, New York, because that was just sort of a beautiful place to me and a quaint town. And my husband and I have actually gone and visited Briarcliff Manor just because I wanted to see if what I was envisioning in my mind was playing out in real life. I had never been there, and actually, I think it was spot on. It was a great choice for a fictitious theater. We've driven up and down Pleasantville Road where the theater is supposed to be, and a lot of the landmarks that I mentioned in the story, the Moonbeam Cafe, and the patio, which is a restaurant, are there. We've actually eaten there and had coffee there, and it's just a quaint, quiet little town. And you could imagine these strange things that I describe in my book happening there. So that was a lot of fun to do.
Another question is, when writing a book, do you have a critique group, a beta readers, a developmental editor, any of these?
At this point, I actually have my father read my books for a couple of reasons. He can be very critical, and that can be a great thing. I'm not great at taking criticism. I'm not sure if other writers are or if it's just me, but I'm not so great at it. And he can tell me if something is terrible and just, needs my attention. And also, I think it's great to have a man read my books because he can say to me, a guy doesn't sound like this. Because try as I might, I'm writing on both sides. I'm writing the hero and the heroine, but I'm never going to be a man. So it's nice to have a guy say, yes, this is what a guy sounds like, or nope, that we wouldn't say that. So that's very helpful as well.
That's wonderful. That's new. I have to tell you, that is wonderful to get the male perspective and to be your dad. That's wonderful. What marketing techniques have been successful for you?
I wish I knew exactly which ones were successful. And like I said, I think this is changing all of the time, but I would say just sending out tweets is still a pretty tried and true method, and it's free. I've met a lot of other writers that way, and for some reason, readers don't take as much offense to a hard sale on Twitter from my experience as they do on Facebook. Facebook, they seem to get more annoyed with that. So on Facebook, I kind of stick to, talking about my life and just trying to make friends there. And once in a while, just sort of softly work in things about my books. But with Twitter, I find I can send out tweets all day long and somebody will read and appreciate them. And I know I've gotten sales from doing that. I really haven't done a lot of paid advertising, and some things that I've paid for have just been a total waste of money. I've done Amazon ads, but haven't had a whole lot of success with those. And a lot of times when the sales pop up, I just don't know where they come from. But I think having a newsletter is a great thing to keep reminding your audience, hey, I'm here. Even if you don't have a new release, it's good to send these out on some sort of a regular schedule. I like writing blogs. I'm not sure if they've generated sales, but I do enjoy writing them, and I enjoy connecting with readers in that way and reading their comments. I wish I had a little more time because I've had to slow down on that since becoming a mommy as well. But I was blogging once a week, and I hope someday to get back to doing that again. And I think just having a social media presence still, a decade into this is still important. Obviously, we're all still on social media. So it's one way to keep connecting with people a lot faster than you can do in person, no matter what, because it's just a lot harder and more time consuming to be out in person all the time, trying to meet new readers that way.
Have you found a difference in sales since you've gotten your new covers?
Yes, when I first got the new covers, I saw a nice bump in sales. So I think that did help.
And what's next after the Rayborn Theater series?
So I have several more series planned, and it's a question of which one am I going to sit down and write first. I have a suspenseful series about drug lords, and I would like to write that series. I have one about a casino and a beach, and I have another series about skiing and murder mystery from some time ago and how it's affected the present. So just very, very vague. I'm not giving you much, but I have a lot more than that written down. So it'll be one of those 3 series next after the Rayburn Theater series.
Any manuscripts that didn't get published that, the ones under the bed that maybe you're going to revise, or all those don't exist?
They don't really exist for me. The very first manuscript that I wrote, I didn't really like and just kind of lost interest in. So I let that one go. But every one that I was working on when I first became published, that all became part of the Pinnacles of Power series, which was my first series. And every one after is part of something that I intend to publish at some point. So I don't like to have a lot of regrets, and I don't really have any with this. So
are you the type of author that reads while you're writing, or do you completely stop reading just so that you're not grabbing any ideas from the other author? And if you do you have any favorite authors?
Yes, I definitely like to read while I'm writing. I think kind of like I was saying earlier about workshops and how they sort of keep the craft and editing techniques and such fresh in your mind. I think reading in the different genres sort of keeps those going in your mind. So I might read one contemporary romance, one romantic suspense, and one paranormal romance at the same time, just to sort of keep my creativity going. And you never know where ideas are going to come from. I think to get somebody else's book in your head to the extent that it started to sound, that your book started to sound like theirs, would really take some doing. So at least for me, I'm pretty comfortable staying on my own track and not getting too distracted by what I'm reading. But it does keep dialogue just flowing in my head. So it gets me back to that writing place when I get back to the computer myself. So I do find that helpful. I really like Shayna Galen's books. She writes historic romance. Nicola Cornick, also historic. A lot of my favorite authors, ironically, are historical, even though I write contemporary, because I want to show my readers that romance is possible in today's world. But I do, most of my favorites are historical.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. If there's any other questions, you put them in the chat. If not, I want to say thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I learned a lot. I learned a lot on your website, but I definitely learned a little more tonight. Thank you again, and much success with the final Rayburn Theater Series book, and also congratulations on your baby.
Thank you so much.
And becoming a new mom. Yes, congratulations. Everyone's up. And wishing you all the best.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. It's really nice to see you guys. It's been such a long time.